Beau is a long time lean guy. He's one of our few guests that has more years than me in this lean journey business. Started out, and Beau, if I get any of this wrong, please correct me. Started out as an industrial engineer. Eventually came to a point where he saw the light and said, "Hey, we gotta, some of those same old solutions that we've been pushing in industrial engineering are not necessarily cutting it, and there's some better ways to do things, maybe described as some of these lean approaches." But Beau has his own consulting business, now mostly retired, but he's also a leading author in the area. I don't know, Beau, you can tell us what you think your most famous book is, but kind of wrote the book on value stream management and mapping value streams in office and administrative environments. So taking lean out of the factory and into the office. But Beau, welcome and thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks, Eric. Glad to be here.
All right. So Beau, I tried to, I probably didn't do good service to your whole background and story, but can you tell us a little bit about like what your current position is, what its relationship to lean? I kind of kidded you a little bit about being semi-retired. I keep on seeing you pop back up here and there. You don't look so retired to me.
No, I'm not. And so doctors, lawyers, and consultants don't retire if they don't have to. They just kind of, when the phone rings, they do something. If the phone doesn't ring, they go play golf or go sail or something else like that. So I guess I'm in that mode now. But right now, what I'm really trying to do over the past, it happened slightly pre-pandemic, but it really accentuated during the pandemic, was to figure out how to give back. I call it give back to people, to share with them what I've learned that might be helpful to them. I've met people who I think are they're pretty smart. They're way smarter than I was at their age. And I'm thinking, wow, this person can really go far. So what can I do to help? So I'm thinking a lot about what would be helpful first, and then how to put it on the table. So I have two things going on now. I'm putting a series of videos together short videos that are self-teaching. So people don't have to hire me. These are free to them, and they can kind of get an idea and run with it based on how I describe the situation and suggestions I have on how to go running down that road. And the other is, so that's more for business people with active problems. And then there's another group, one of my favorite groups I'm trying to work on are the undergrads. And the undergrads don't know much. I didn't know anything when I graduated. They don't know much about.
By the way, Beau, we're talking about undergrads, like the people that are on this Zoom call now?
Yeah, the ones who won't show their faces, they just have names. Wait a minute. Okay. Now, is this better? Should I talk like this? I'm just checking. Sorry.
We're
little kidding. Little kidding. So if something is important to know as you move forward in your job, why not learn it now? My career was based on selling my services to people who never learned it in school. I didn't learn it in school either. So I'm kind of the aftermarket. And if enough people knew this stuff when they graduated, then people like me wouldn't be around, and you would be paying expensive consultants. You'd actually know some stuff to help move forward. So now I'm thinking about for the undergrads, I know what's important to understand. What I'm challenging myself with is, how do you present it in a way that they'll lean into it instead of just say, well, that sounds like a bunch of crap, or I don't get it. So I'm really thinking hard about how to create a pull system to pull interest into a concept, so people can learn who don't know much about the stuff that I know.
Yeah, I think that's real interesting, Beau, and there's so many things I would like to sort of talk to you and maybe question you on, but let's just kind of stick with that sort of last idea, because the students haven't, you're in the analyze phase, they more seem introduced to the pull concept a little bit more in the improve phase of say, okay, if your problem is inventory, we're going to teach you how to pull, right? But you're taking that same sort of concept that we use with physical goods and saying it kind of applies to ideas also. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, maybe. So this might be a check on whether we're on the same page or not. I honestly feel that a lot of teaching is pushing stuff on kids, people, me as an adult, students, doesn't matter. We're pushing concepts on them and we're testing them on it. I get that. I'm not against that. But I've always found it more interesting if you can find a way to suck them in, which is kind of a pull system.
Right.
I want people to pull to me saying, you have something very interesting that I need to learn based on how I present it. So if I talk about Procter and Gamble doing blah, blah, blah versus the store down the street everybody goes to, I'd much rather talk about the store down the street because then you'll engage. And who cares about soap with Procter and Gamble? So it's just finding a way to feel, to have people interested in learning by engaging them in where they are. And since I'm a couple generations away from most of those in school now, I have to think real hard about, well, what is that? Where are they now? And how do I write in such a way to attract them?
Well, but I think it's interesting because one of the things that, you and I, have experienced is when you're working with an organization doing some sort of continuous improvement project or Kaizen event, the dynamic, works really well if you get them into the doing, right? Mm-hmm. And they're having problems and they're struggling, and you say, and then they're asking you for help, as opposed to you say, okay, read these 20 books and take these, 130 hours of training, and then you've got this sort of big inventory of learning or knowledge, but there's no pull, right? So right. If you just do it a little bit at a time, and as they go through the process, you say, okay, what are you thinking, or what do you need to know? That creates that sort of pull for the learning. We try to do that a little with these projects, but how do you do that on a continuous 2-hour class lecture sort of basis, right?
Yeah, so it becomes a challenge. I'm not saying there's always one answer, but it becomes a challenge. And to your point, I think part of my life, I've been the person who knows the answers. And I actually started my career knowing all the answers. And DeMake is very good at making experts. So one of the pieces of advice I have to you, just because you know the perfect answer, don't use it. The perfect answer is not the best answer. Yeah. And DeMake or Lean, regardless of what tool you have, it gives you the optimum answer. The optimum answer is impossible in any organization because it doesn't take into context where the people are, what capabilities they have, what technology they have, what culture do they have. And all of a sudden you go from the very, very, very best to, oh, I mean, this is good enough. It'll work really well. And getting that through my head took 12 years. I didn't understand why people couldn't abide by the perfect answer. And I'm hoping that that's one of the things I can impart to people today is you might have the perfect answer. That's fine. That's a reference point. But the best answer is something that's going to work well and make a huge difference inside the organization. So you kind of have to tap down the I know it type of response to working with them to figure out what's best for them.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I've sort of taken away from our relationship and discussions, Beau, is the power of leading by questions, right? That you're going to try to ask questions because we know that the people doing the work are often, have the best solutions or the solutions that will get you to that, not the optimum point, but the point that works for the people and the culture, right? So you need to involve them. You can't just be the expert that walks in and tells them what to do. That we know that doesn't work, right?
Yeah, so for instance, Shahana said we don't have enough people. So a coaching question might be, what would one more person do? And if you say run around and try to gather all the stuff ahead of time, no, that's not value added. That stuff has to be sitting ready to use. So it's very interesting to get down and dirty with those simple questions.
Right.
I don't know anything about resetting a court. I know nothing about it, but I'm intrigued by what actually goes on. And to your point, just kind of on the follow-up, I've only seen one client in my life who needed more people. And it was a primary care clinic. They're cut to the bone and they need more people. But it's just the industry and the way the pressures are on it to cut them, to really truly overwork them.
Right.
So
well, Beau, so I want to encourage the students to ask some questions, and Wes, I'm going to kind of count on you and Kaylee and Chris to sort of watch the chat and whatnot if something sort of comes up. But Beau, maybe we can kind of give the students a little bit more food for thought. We're kind of a little bit in the, I know we enjoy talking about these things conceptually in the clouds a little bit, but trying to get down to earth. Maybe you can share some of your experiences in some real world applications or some things that the students might, be able to hang on to a little bit better.
So one of your prep questions was like, talk about your best success or your biggest failure. I could talk about all sorts of stuff. I've been in it. I've been around long enough to be familiar with most industries. But I think I have a couple of things that might be helpful. One, I worked for General Motors as a consultant in 2005, and we worked only in the office. GM had been really busy on the shop floor, and they had left the office untouched, which is really where the true opportunities are. They're very rarely on the shop floor to the same extent as the office, because we've had industrial engineers on the shop floor for 5 decades tightening up that stuff. So yeah, there are opportunities, but not like the office. The office is untouched. Yeah. So we worked with them, and we got to the point of saving them $2 billion a year, an annuity every year, $2 billion with a B. And the second year, they saved $3.5 billion. The third year, they went into a mini recession. This is probably 2007, or maybe just beginning on 2008. And they decided to go back to the way they've always done things, because times are tough. And when times are tough, you go with what you're familiar with. And they're familiar with doing things the old way. So everything they did almost was wiped out. And so as a result, we never talked about it. It was never publicized. We had the biggest cost savings in the universe and couldn't talk about it because A, GM wasn't a good word back then because of what they did. And B, they're not doing it anymore. Right. So one of the things that I thought about is, then why not? Why do you stare billions of dollars in the face and just go do something else because you're comfortable with it? And I'm always challenged by what the leaders really think and how they're really engaged. And that's one of the things that I worry about a lot. And the other thing I think is important for the students is I worked 62 hospitals simultaneously in the state of Michigan to improve patient flow inside the emergency department. And we weren't allowed inside the hospitals because there was no budget. So we had to figure out a way to teach that staff off-site with a bunch of other staffs. We might have 6 to 13 hospitals staff teams in a room, teaching them something, and then have them go back and teach others. It's a little bit more involved than that, but that's actually what was going on. And it was successful. And we went around and asked why. And they said, we learned more from each other than we did from you. And I've never forgotten that. And what I've learned is that you can teach all you want, you can coach all you want, but it really hits the road when people in the same situation get together and start working together. They teach each other what's going on, and that sticks. That sticks better than anything I can do. Right. So that's really focused my approach to clients.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I think I may have mentioned to you that like one of my research projects going forward, because as I kind of get towards the end of my career, I need one more good idea to kind of squeeze out of myself. And one of them is talking to or trying to sort of understand the functionality of what we call lean consortia, right? So lean is one of those, or one of the dynamics of lean is that people like to share and learn from each other, right? And we kind of know that. I think, one of the sort of the quintessential start for that might have been, Toyota and their tier one suppliers, right? So after they sort of got sort of this lean thinking Toyota production system going on in-house, okay, we gotta get our suppliers to do this, and we're gonna have our suppliers talk to each other, and share what they learn and do, so that all boats sort of rise up. But it is that same sort of dynamic of having people talk to each other about things. And the nice thing about lean is that it's all about processes, and regardless of whether you're a butcher, baker, or candlestick maker, all of them have processes, and that they maybe can learn from each other, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be the same process. I've had clients with teams from different departments doing different things, and it's about the thinking. They challenge you on how to think about stuff.
Right.
So that's, to me, is amazing to see the teams help each other think better, because it's all about the thinking. And from my standpoint, it also took me a long time to stop thinking for them and find a way to get them to facilitate and coach them on how to think better, but not to do the thinking.
Right. And I think, these are good lessons for these students to sort of take out there in the real world. So, Beau and I are both sort of very interested in, the education, the university education of sort of the first generations of lean educated college graduates, right? What are you guys going to do when you get out there in the real world and you start running into this? How are you going to approach teaching people or trying to get people to improve? Are you going to go out there and tell them how to do it? Are you going to be the, I'm the smart one, and I'm gonna show you what I learned? Or are you going to ask questions? Are you going to set up that sort of dynamic that creates that pull for information and knowledge? All right. Speaking of pull for information or knowledge, so we're not doing real well on chat room question generation. People should also know you can just raise your hand. You don't have to type your question in chat. We'd love to get you on the screen asking your question. You'll be recorded for posterity, and we'll take that, and for what it's worth, we're going to post it on the Central Coast Lean website, and you're going to get at least 6.5 views. That's kind of our target,
and
right?
that's thanks to Beau's star power.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
we get the
yeah. Without me,
vote
there'd be
for me.
zero. Yeah.
Now there'd be one. Eric could watch it.
Exactly. I'll have to relive these conversations. Let's see. Anybody have a question for Beau? They don't have to be the hardest questions in the world. Yeah, thank you.
So you mentioned with GM during that mini recession how they were, like you were saying, staring billions of dollars in the face, and they went back to what they were comfortable with. So what, in your mind, do you think is a method you use to kind of deal with that hesitation to do what might be the right thing versus what the comfortable thing is? Like, how do you mitigate that?
The only way I know how to do it is move up in front of the executives and stay in front of them. And you need someone, so this could be executives, this could be team leaders, this could be at any level of the organization. You need to have people who understand what's right and be able to influence. They don't have to be the CEO. but they have to be able to understand, listen, if we go down this path, we've been there before and it's really bad. So what is there something else we should be doing to not return to the way it was? And you need someone of influence to have that, to have that North Star, and to be able to talk to people in a language that they understand at that company. I could never be the person at GM to stand up, not being an outside consultant. I could never say those words. It would not be, no one would accept it. Somebody who's respected and influential needs to keep the pulse beat of what's going on and be aware of little things that might go wrong. And that's the person I'm looking for, because that's the person I need to work with so they understand what their role is. So I'm not saying that would have saved GM, but in general, that's true of most of the transformations I've seen or heard about, is they didn't have the right person with influence and respect leading it.
You know, it's interesting too, Beau. It's certainly true of any kind of, you know, change, transformation, you know, particularly in lean, but also when the students are looking at this from the DMAIC framework, right? You know, I put what you're talking about sort of in that, you know, certainly you need to do it up front, but at the end, you know, you need to look at things from that control standpoint. How do we make it stick? You know, and you might identify the fact that, well, if we don't have top level C-suite buy-in to this, it's going to revert back, because there is that general tendency, human behavioral tendency, to revert back to what's familiar, what's easy, what they know.
Yeah.
Versus the push forward is sort of a different kind of dynamic.
Yeah. So I was actually in a room with the CEO presenting to the top 50 leaders in General Motors, and he was talking about this project. This is great. We're all going to do it. And all said, yes, sir. And no one knew what that meant. So if no one knows what it means, how's it ever going to be successful?
Oh.
So I don't know if I answered the question, Kalista. Sorry, Kalista. Is that, do you have a follow-up, or are you okay with that?
I think I have like an inkling of an idea, but I think you answered my question, so I appreciate it.
Okay. And GM's not alone, by the way. It's just scalable. GM's this big, but everybody has the same problem.
Yeah.
It's just scaled bigger because as GM, they have a lot of money and a lot of savings potential.
Right. Yeah, the potential is just sort of huge on this.
Yeah.
Callista's back again.
Sorry, I just realized
Oh.
what I was trying to convey. So how do you deal with that in a situation where like there's a change that's necessary, and the need for that change places like an unequal burden upon the parties it affects? So how do you get the people for whom it is more trouble to change than to stay the same? How do you get those people's buy-in, like to make them have empathy for the people that the change is necessary for?
That's a great question. I don't have an exact answer, but I have a suggestion in general about change. If you're trying, so this, I'm going to call this a push. You're going to push change on people who don't want it because they're going to be adversely affected. If you need to push, and you may need to, you have to make very sure that whatever change you're doing is clearly aligned with the strategy of your business. If it's important to the business and this change is critical to be successful 3 or 5 years out, then use that to say, we cannot succeed without this change. There could be people who are affected more than others. Let's understand what that is and deal with it. But be sure that you're saying this is about the survival of the company. We need to bring everybody along. And if your change has nothing to do with what's going on with the business, you're not going to have much luck making a substantial change if it's not really aligned with where the company needs to go. And that happens more often than not. People find a great opportunity in a great area, and they don't even know that product's being dropped a year from now, but they want to totally transform this product. Why? It's not going to be sold a year from now, as an example.
Yeah, that's actually something it is a huge struggle in a lot of industries when you talk about like great ideas. Like the world is flush and ripe with great ideas, but the thing that I always encourage leaders is don't pay lip service to ideas. You have to find something, like you can't just intellectually agree with an idea like, oh yeah, that sounds really good, and expect to get it implemented. You have to care about it.
Yeah.
Like it's got to hit you in that heart piece, because that's where real accountability comes from. Like I found that when people think about it like, oh, that sounds like a really good idea, and in their brain they've reconciled like, yeah, that would be great if we could do that thing. If it hasn't hit the heart, if they're not emotionally invested in it in some level, their desire to hold other people accountable is only going to go as far as when it's convenient, if that makes sense. Like when it becomes harder to hold people accountable than it would be to just abandon the idea. Like if they don't care about it, they're going to abandon the idea 100 times out of 100.
And it's much easier not to care about it if it's not strategically important.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So knowing the strategy. So another gap is having the leaders effectively communicate the strategy, and then asking each of the other people below them, what does that mean to you?
Right.
And so that's kind of a cascade of strategic thinking, and it's kind of we call a catch ball back and forth. If we want to go down this direction, what's your role? What's your role? What's your role? And have everyone understand it. One person says, this is going to kill me. Oh, then let's talk about it, because we're not trying to kill anybody. We're trying to go down this path together.
Yeah. Well, also I'd sort of throw back to, I love this conversation, but I also sort of think of, back to that's one of that original questions, and this is the one I mentioned I learned from you, what do you know and how do you know it?
Mm-hmm.
When you say that, people are going to hate this, or a certain subsegment of people are going to hate this, how do you know? Well, I think they'll hate it, right? You should go ask them and try to sort of work through as well. How can we make this better? Because it's, it's strategically important to align. This is going to happen. How can we make it work? All right, Beau, this has got to be the story. This has got to be the last one, though.
Okay, no, just thought of a story.
Go ahead.
So this goes on. So you're about to get to the improve phase. Someone's going to push back. I have a story. I was working with an insurance company, and we were talking about the improve phase in your language, not my language.
Sure.
And someone says, my way is better. This will not work. My way is better. And everyone knew this person to be a complainer. She had already been written off years ago. She's always complaining about stuff. Her way is better. So I looked at her and said, well, that's very interesting. Why don't we try 2 experiments? People over here will do it your way. People over here will do it the way this team designed. She said, fine. So we did parallel pilots, and hers was better. So my thinking is, if people push back on a change, then test it. What would you do instead? We'll give you the chance. Get involved. Yeah. And at the same time, the other people are going to do it this way. How can we then compare what's going on and see which one's better? Yeah. Sorry, that just hit
no. That was too good to leave on the floor, Beau. Thanks for picking it up. Hey, Beau. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap her up for tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Per standard practice, standard work. Do you have any last words of parting advice for these soon-to-be lean graduates from Cal Poly as they take forward in their career?
Not much that I haven't already said, but I really like the analyze phase. Yeah. I really like proving with data what you only have an opinion of, or disproving your opinion. And qualitative data is as strong as quantitative. It really is, it's data. So I really, really like the analyze phase. It's always fun.
Yeah.
So pay attention to that, because so what Eric hasn't said is a problem half, no, what is it? A problem half solved? Okay.
Problem well defined is half solved, maybe something like that.
Problem well defined, staff. Thank you. It's been a long night over here. I'm 3 hours behind you.
Yeah.
But the more information you get in the analyze phase,
Yeah.
the better you will define a problem, which means the better chance you're going to have of solving it.
I get you. All right, Beau, thank you very much. Okay.